time for the next chapter of The Curse of the Ancients, the fourth book of the Infinity Ring series, Mark de la Pena. Chapter 14, Wisdom in a Prison Cell. "In you go," a Spanish guard shouted, shoving Sarah and Dak into a large cell that already held dozens of Mayans, many of whom Sarah had just seen inside the cave. "You killed my brother," a Mayan girl shrieked, running toward the open door. "Not me personally," the man said, grinning, "but maybe one of my colleagues." Another guard held the girl back with a long club. Brother Delanda warned you about practicing your witchcraft. But do any of you listen? No. He slammed closed the door and locked it, shouting through the sliding peephole. "There's a price to pay for choosing the devil's path." Aiden, will you try to get him? The guards left, and the young Mayan leader from the cave helped the sobbing girl up and led her to one bench in the room. He cleared away the people sitting there and had the girl lay down. Then he knelt, took her hands into his, and spoke to her in a hushed tone Sarah couldn't quite make out. Sarah took in her surroundings. The cell was half underground. There were barred windows in three of the walls, a little above eye level, and through them Sarah could only see a small portion of the sky, which was turning dark. An older Mayan man approached Dak and Sarah and stood there with his arms crossed. "What's the most important thing in the world?" he asked. "What?" Dak said. He turned to Sarah and mouthed, "The riddle." "I know," Sarah mouthed back. "Just as I suspected," the man said. "You don't have an answer." "No, we do," Dak shouted. "The most important thing in the world is corn." The man scoffed and moved away from Dak and Sarah. "Asymmetrical tortillas?" Dak called after him. The man didn't even turn around. Sarah led Dak to an empty corner of the cell. "The question was right out of the riddle," Dak said. "We just have to figure out the answer, and we'll be a step closer to solving it." Sarah leaned her back against the dirty prison wall and let herself slide down to a sitting position. Her face falling into her hands. She never felt so defeated in her life, or depressed. She was only 11 years old. Wasn't 11 too young to process the things she'd experienced over the past 24 hours? The realization she had found her parents face down in the flooded bar, watching a man take down by an arrow when he didn't even do anything, being thrown into prison. She couldn't stand the way the Mayans were treated by the monks. How could foreign people come waltzing into someone else's village and start telling them what to believe? To make things worse, the Mayans didn't trust her and Dak because they didn't know some secret code word. Dak sat down next to her. "We'll be okay, Sarah." She looked up at him. "Will we, Dak? Because I'm not sure anymore." He pointed at her satchel holding the infinity ring. "We still have the ring, and I have the S-square. We can use this time to regroup and figure out the riddle." Sarah shook her head. "What's the point, Dak? Are we really going to make a difference?" "Of course we are," Dak said. "What's going on? You usually have such a good attitude." Sarah paused, fighting the lump in her throat. "Excuse me. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Dak. We're not actually fixing history at all. We're not making anything better for anyone." She motioned toward the Mayans. "They just want to live their lives and learn about the world and follow their traditions. And they can't even sneak off to a cave to honor what they believe in. One of them has to pay with his life." "We've already talked about this," Dak said. He looked away from Sarah for a few seconds like he was thinking. Sarah saw over his shoulder that the Mayan leader was now pacing the cell. "The point of fixing the breaks," Dak said, "isn't to make history more morally correct." "Why not?" Sarah said. "Why aren't we trying to make the world a better place?" Dak shrugged. "I don't know. Sometimes we are, Sarah, I think, but we're just two kids. 2.5 if you count Loverboy. The point is, We're sent here to each place to fix a break, not humanity. So you don't ever question it? No, I do, Dak said, but at the end of the day, I trust the historians. They've been working to avert the cataclysm and defeat the SQ longer than we've been alive. Sarah stared at Dak. She wanted to come right out and tell him how she'd been given a glimpse of the unspeakable cataclysm, but she couldn't. She had to keep this cancerous knowledge to herself. Sarah grabbed her own hair and pulled, saying, I don't know if I can go on, Dak. I really don't. But you have to, the Malian leader said, and you will. Sarah looked up and saw a young man now hovering over her and Dak, his fists clenched. There will always be injustice, he continued. In all things, and many times we will not be able to alter these things. But we can always do is lift our heads and continue on. That part is in our control. Sarah felt embarrassed that the man had overheard her whining. She must have sounded like a spoiled brat. They can lock us behind these walls, the man said, shaking the bars at the windows to the left of Sarah and Dak. All of us, the entire village. But in our minds, we will always remain free. Remember that. He reached a hand out and helped Sarah to her feet, saying, I and Bakab. Sarah, she answered, trying to seem as respectful as possible, because she already admired the man. She had seen how all the people in the cave, many of them much older, were hanging on his every word. Dak elbowed Sarah in the arm and cleared his throat. Oh, she said, and this is my friend Dak. Hi, Dak said. A pleasure to meet you both, Bakab said. Bakab. You're not from around here, obviously, but where you come from doesn't not concern me. It is where you are now that matters, and that is with us. Sarah glanced over at the rest of the Mayans. A few of them didn't seem as eager to accept her and Dak, probably because they didn't know the answer to the question from the riddle. So how do we get out of here? Dak asked. Well, we have our ways, Baka said. This is my 4th time inside this very cell. What they fail to understand is that I have a key to my room. Later this evening, my younger brother will realize I'm not home. The first place he will check is this prison cell, and he knows to bring the key. Wait, you have a key? Dak said. Bakab grinned. When I'm not organizing our gatherings, I work as a locksmith. Seeing the younger man's grin made Sarah feel better. She, too, wanted to be the kind of person she could grin in the face of adversity. We can't remain here long, a second Mayan said. If the great storm comes as predicted, it will flood the cell, and they will leave us to drown. No one here is going to drown, Bakab said. He turned back to Sarah and Dak. And this is my younger cousin, Kanish. He is an excellent locksmith's assistant, and he has traveled extensively, but he worries too much. Wait, there's supposed to be another great storm? Dak said. He banged on the stone wall with the heel of his hand. Sure hope these bad boys are built stronger than they used to be. Bakab lifted Sarah's chin so that their eyes met. Young sister, he said, you have questions swimming in your eyes. I don't know, she said, embarrassed that she looked so uncertain. Why are they even doing this? You aren't hurting anyone tonight. Tired. The monks are frustrated. Their plan is to take over every village from sea to sea, but in order to do this peacefully and efficiently, they must first convert my people to their religion. Then they will believe the land is theirs by divine right, you see. So that's why you gathered in the cave? Sarah said. That and the acoustics make my voice sound nice, Bakab said with another grin. They've been threatening us, Kanish said. Diego de Landa, one of the leaders of the Franciscan monks, said that if we don't obey, he will get rid of everything we hold sacred. Oh, wow, Dak said. I've totally read about this. That Landa dude gets so mad that he orders auto defeat where he... Sarah stomped on Dak's foot to cut him off. Ow! Dak scrunched. You're speculating, of course, Sarah said, shooting Dak a dirty look. Oh, right. I mean, Dak turned to back up. What I meant to say is, aren't you guys afraid something might bad happen to your codices and stuff? Sarah noticed that Kanish was staring at Dak. How could you know something that has not happened yet? He asked. No, I don't, Dak said. It was just, sometimes I get my verbs confused. My hope is that a highly spiritual man like Delanda, Bacab said, would never stoop so low as confiscating our history. Well, I wouldn't hope too hard, Dak said quietly, so only Sarah could hear. Kanish was whispering something into Bacab's ear now. Sarah pulled Dak aside and said, maybe this is the break we're supposed to fix. After talking with Bacab, she felt suddenly re-energized, like she was ready to fight again. Maybe this was the mark of a good leader. That's it, Dak nearly shot him. We have to stop the Landa's eau de feu. Sarah put a finger up to her lips shh, for Dak to lower his voice. So at some point, are you planning to explain what the heck an eau de feu is? He said. Or do you just enjoy hearing yourself say it? Eau de feu, eau de feu, eau de feu. Dak smiled. Just kidding, dude. An eau de feu is, before Dak could finish, a few of the Mayans got up suddenly and started converging around the far window. Bacab and Kanish hurried over to join them. Sarah and Dak stood on their tippy toes near the back of the crowd to try to see what was going on. All Sarah could see was the bottom portion of Monk's robe on the other side of the window. Someone was there. And that someone was kneeling down to look inside the cell. Sarah's eyes widened. It was Rick, dressed like a Franciscan monk. What do you want? One of the Mayans barked at him. To speak with Dak and Sarah, Rick said. I'm not an actual monk, I promise. Rick, Sarah shouted over the crowd. Why should we believe you? Another Mayan said. Sarah started pushing through the pack. If she could just get to him, she could explain. Dak suddenly weaseled right past her, though, and lunged for the window, holding out a piece of jewelry. Rick reached his hand through the narrow bars and took it. It looks like the one you lost, Dak shouted. I thought maybe you'd won it. Thanks, Rick said, slipping it into the bag, holding off the rope with the belt. Why are you here? A woman shouted at Rick. Haven't you people done enough for one night? Several other Mayans began peppering Rick with questions, too, until Babka shouted, Silence! The entire cell went quiet. Thank you, Babka said. Let me ask the boy our question before we proceed any further. The Mayans nodded and made a path for Babka to get to the window. As he wrapped his hands around the bars, he looked up at Rick and said, What is the most important thing in the world, young man? Sarah watched Rick look at the ground, confused. She was about to move towards the window so she could explain that they weren't from around here, and when Rick suddenly raised his eyes to Babka and said, Friendship. All at once, the Mayans looked at one another, nodding, and began reaching their arms through the bars to shake hands with Rick. Sarah turned to Dak, who was already staring at her with a puzzled look in his face. He motioned toward Rick and said, What the? Sarah shrugged and told him, You took the words right out of my mouth. We will read chapter 15 next, and it looks like we are getting so close. I think there's only 19. Oh, no. There's 20. The last one's very, very short. And then we'll get to open up the thing in the front. See, you can see the shiny sticker. I haven't opened it yet. I've been tempted. I hope you're doing well. Have a great night. Bye.